Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Arden, and today we're doing another episode of my reviews for Green Lantern, the animated series. This is episode 7, known as Reckoning. So, this episode begins with the Green Lanterns kind of following the Shard, which is the home base of the Red Lanterns, and they're just kind of observing it, trying to figure out like when they dump their waste, when they do like all their various stuff, in an effort to be able to infiltrate the city without being noticed. Razer, their little captive, I guess you can call him, Red Lantern, is a little annoyed at them, to say the least, and decides, like, he detonates a bomb within the Interceptor, the Green Lantern ship, so that it serves as a distraction, and he runs off to go confront Atrocitus by himself. The idea being he's a lot more head-on than the Green Lanterns. So he goes off, and he manages to actually get into the city and get to a red power battery to recharge his ring. But before he's able to successfully do so, Atrocitus and his goons manage to capture him and kind of bring him to the leader. So Atrocitus has him and he's like, ah ha ha, you think I'd just let you come in here and charge your ring again? Like, no, obviously I'm going to capture you and now we're going to torture you. So he's captured and the other Green Lanterns, I should say, figure out like, oh, that's not good. So they go and try and rescue him. They're able to infiltrate the city as well, along with Aya. And she's kind of able to, like, go find a computer system and download all this important information while they go and try and find Razer. They are able to do so after Hal dresses up as one of the guards and pretends to capture Kilowog. Hal takes Kilowog to Atrocitus, and then they all turn on him, and they're able to escape. But Atrocitus finds Aya and is kind of able to hold her hostage. And he's like, well, look, I have your little robot friend, so, like, you gotta come to Battery Square now, or else I don't know, kill her, I guess. And so Razor's like, alright, I'll go save her, you guys go get the ship, and we'll get out of here. And they have a big fight scene, and Atrocitus reveals that he is the reason that Razor came to be. So the idea is that Razor lost his family, and he thought it was due to some, I don't know what he thought it was, but the idea is that Atrocitus was behind it. Atrocitus did all that to try and create Razor. We also learn earlier in this episode that Atrocitus' origins are grounded in his people refusing to surrender to the Guardians of the Universe and then being destroyed by these guys called the Manhunters. Obviously, like, Hal finds out about this in the church, and he's like, he doesn't know anything about it, so this is the first we're hearing of the story, and maybe it's the Red Lantern side of the story. Like, we don't know what the Guardians did exactly, but it certainly is suspicious. So all that happens. They're able to escape. Razor's he defeats Atrocitus and he's about to kill him, and he decides not to. He instead takes Aya with him, and he grabs a power battery too. And then basically the episode ends with Aya being like, yeah, I downloaded some pretty important information from the Red Lantern computer, and she shows that he has a fleet full of warships ready to attack. And that's where the episode ends. So it was pretty cool. I liked the episode on the whole. It was a lot of fun. There are a few issues I have with it. First, I wish that Atrocitus had a less generic voice. Like, he's very, got a deep kind of generic villain voice where it's, like, oh, ha, 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 like, fools, you can't outsmart the great Atrocitus, I guess, is my best impression of it. I'm not a voice actor, but I always kind of pictured his voice being a lot more animalistic, if you will. Like Doomsday's voice during the Injustice Gods Among Us game. Or actually, he's voiced, Atrocitus himself is voiced in Infinite Crisis, a new game, and a pretty cool one, and that's kind of what I pictured his voice, like being more like growly and kind of ferocious, I guess, where he's like, I'll destroy you all, kind of thing, as opposed to just like a calm, deep voice. But, you know, artist interpretations and all that. Shard I really liked. That doesn't really have a comic book counterpart exactly. There's something similar that we'll get into later in this series, but Shard's kind of its own thing. It's kind of a variation on the Red Lantern homeworld, which was Atrocitus' like ruined and destroyed home planet in Sector 666. This is a little more interesting because it's mobile and it's still the same idea. It's all that really remains of Atrocitus' home. So it works. I like it as a whole. It's a neat idea. I read online that it might be powered by a red power battery, just like the Interceptor. That's an interesting idea. It adds some interesting parity between the Green and Red Lanterns, but I don't know if it's true. I don't even know if the designers of the show planned that at all or anything like that. I did notice in this episode how ridiculous the panels on the Interceptor are. Like, they are just a series of nondescript, completely unlabeled buttons that serve, like, no obvious purpose. So, Kilowog's sitting in front of basically a semicircle of light. And, like, there's no buttons in between it, and he's just pressing random parts of the semicircle to do stuff. And it's like, yeah, that makes no sense. And it's a normal sci-fi thing to do, to have, like, an undescriptive panel of buttons and just press random things and be like, aha, we activated the photon torpedoes. But you don't have to do that. So a good example of a sci-fi show that doesn't do that is Doctor Who. If you listen to interviews of like David Tennant, and I don't know if Matt Smith did this, but I know Tennant did this for sure. He looked at his panel, the TARDIS, and he had in his own mind an idea of what each and every button and lever and all those stuff on that little central panel of the TARDIS does. And what that means is that when he's acting and stuff, he can make his actions and movements deliberate on that little control panel. That's super interesting because it adds a lot of authenticity. And if you ever go back and watch those episodes with Tennant and he's doing something in the TARDIS, it makes his actions look a lot more deliberate and purposeful, and it makes the TARDIS seem much more real. So I get that this is an animated kids show and they don't quite have to do that, but I like when they add a little detail of like trying to figure out these logistics and make it look a little more plausible than it is. They don't need buttons in English. That wouldn't make a lot of sense either, but something would have been a little nice for that. But it's not a huge deal. We got to hear the Red Lantern Oath in this episode, and that was always really cool. I love all the Lantern Oaths. They're really interesting. My favorite has to be Orange, which I wrote out here just for fun. It's what's mine is mine, and mine and mine, and mine and mine and mine, not yours. And that's it. That's the Orange Lantern Oath, and it's just such a funny parody on all the others. But they're all really good. I love the Lantern Oaths because they tell you so much about what each of the corps stands for, and they're just fun little dramatic moments. That movie ruined it, though. I forget how they did it, but he did it all growly, and everything about that movie is underwhelming, including that oath. Anyways, I don't know how that led into this conversation, but there you go. There was a little bit of humor peppered in here and there that I always appreciate. They're trying to get into the ship, and the guy's like, oh, I'll crawl through one of these vents. And he's like, how are you going to get in through that? Like, and she's like, oh, with these. Falls to pieces and easily climbs in there, and it's like, oh yeah, like she can do that. Little stuff like that is really good. So let's talk about, we got to see a lot more of the Red Lanterns and their backstory, so I'm going to talk about them for a little bit. I talked about them in my review for the pilot, and how I felt like the Red Lanterns in the show are much more villains than the Red Lanterns I know from the comics. If you go and read the Red Lantern comic series, which unfortunately is ending soon, but had a really good run, they're a lot easier to empathize with. Like, so take Atrocitus, for example. Atrocitus had a horrible, horrible thing happen to him. And regardless of whether you agree with his methods now, or like how he goes about solving his problems, or how hell-bent he is on revenge, all of which I agree is not ideal, you have to empathize with what happened to him, and he has a legitimate problem with the Guardians of the Universe. I don't think that quite carries over into the show as well, and I kind of wish it did, because it made the whole thing a lot more complex. It made it a lot more satisfying when Atrocitus did eventually get his opportunity for revenge, which is interesting. I don't want to give too much away in that comics, but that does eventually actually happen, and it is amazing. One of my favorite parts in like Green Lantern history. So I just kind of wish that they did a little more to that. In the show, Atrocitus comes across as a real and true hypocrite. So he had all this bad stuff happen to him, included like in both the show and the comics. But only in the show did he ever like exact genocide on other races in an attempt to create Red Lanterns. The Atrocitus I know from the comics would never do that. He is not a nice guy, but he isn't a hypocrite. He would never do what the Guardians did to him. So I find that a little bit annoying. It seems it makes the Atrocitus in this show just full of himself, because he's nothing but a villain, because he did this horrible thing to Razer. He's no better than the Manhunters. So I am a little annoyed by that. It's not the end of the world. I'm just saying I like the Red Lanterns in the comics much better, and you should check them out because they're not this generic villain exactly. They're a little more nuanced than that. And something I really liked about the show is that it usually does nuance a little better. Instead of, rarely do they have these pure villains in the show exactly, but they kind of do here. So it's not a big deal. It does annoy me, and it annoyed me in the pilot, and it kind of annoys me again. But, oh well, the Reds won't be around forever, or at least not the way they exist now, so it'll get better, I guess. Spoilers? I don't think that matters. So I do really like this episode's ending overall. It works for me on quite a few fronts. So I get the impression, Razer didn't run out of time in this episode. He literally just kind of realized what Atrocitus did to him, who and what Atrocitus stands for, and all this stuff about hypocrisy I just said, and decided he didn't want to be Atrocitus. That he didn't want to lower himself to having to kill Atrocitus. He won the fight, and so he rescued his friend and left. I really like that. That shows an interesting growth in Razer and an interesting change. And normally, like I've said, I like how this show deals with the theme of death, but it doesn't rely on it as a crutch. Like Razer does learn that it doesn't endorse killing necessarily. And there are situations where you could at least argue for killing somebody, but it's interesting to show that at the very least it's not always necessary, and that Razer is choosing not to do this. And I thought that was a really profound thing for the show to show. And it's such a little moment, but I think it means a lot. And I liked it. I just really liked it. I thought it kind of wrapped up the ending nicely and showed why Razer is breaking off from the Red Lanterns so severely, and why he kind of should. Because these Red Lanterns are really hard to empathize with and to want to be a part of. Even though the Red Lanterns in the comics, that's a lifetime commitment, because you can't take those off. The red ring in the comics serves as your heart. You will die. So it's not a big deal, but obviously I do prefer the ones in the comics, but they do show some interesting stuff here, and I do like that ending. And Razer also got his own power battery, which is great, so now we don't have to worry about him losing the charge. And it was just such a great little moment of taking your power battery, Atrocitus, but it was such a good victory against him. Obviously there's more to come with the Reds, but I like this ending. And I also like how there was this unresolved tension between Hal and Razer at the end of the episode. Razer's not immediately forgiven for all those actions. He did make some pretty harsh and severe mistakes in this episode, stuff that likely will cost the Green Lanterns to a degree. They did end up helping themselves because they found out about the warships, they got the power battery, but they probably could have done a lot of that stuff without getting caught, and now they can't attack the city and infiltrate it without much more difficulty, because obviously the Reds are going to be ready for this. So Razer isn't automatically forgiven. I don't know if they'll go into this more in future episodes. We're kind of reaching the point where I stopped watching it the first time, so it'll all be kind of new to me. But in either case, I like that there are consequences to Razer's actions, both in the positive side, where choosing not to kill Atrocitus, and in the negative side, where he just sabotages his friend's ship and leaves. So that's good for a kid's show, and it's obvious you want to show actions have consequences, but this show does a good job at meaningfully doing that. And that's about it. Another one of these quick ones. I kind of screwed up my work schedule for Comic Island this week, so it's not a big deal. I couldn't get a video done today, realistically, besides one of these, so I just decided to do one of these. There are cool stuff coming out on the horizon. I've kind of talked about them in some of the earlier vlog videos, so I don't really want to add much more to that, but I did confirm a couple things today that will be cool going forward. So look forward to new videos, more exciting videos than these, I guess, but whatever. These are just, like I said, these are supplemental. These are done on days when I know I won't be able to do a full good video anyways. So these take an hour to, from when I start filming to when I get it put up on YouTube. So it's not unreasonable. So I kind of do these as a little extra thing, an extra hour out of my day, just to give you guys a little more content. And yeah, so hopefully you'll enjoy it, and you can look forward to new stuff coming forward. So as always, don't forget to subscribe, and keep reading comics.